Outside MetLife Stadium today are a series of billboards from the Marijuana Policy Project with a message to the NFL. Let your players smoke weed. The NFL bans the use of marijuana by its players and can suspend players if they fail drug tests up to 4 games for the first-time offense. But the billboards make the argument that weed is a lot less dangerous than alcohol and, for that matter, less dangerous than football. One study found that football players are 3 times more likely than the general population to have neurological diseases later in life. And as former Surgeon General Joyce Elders points out, marijuana is less toxic than many of the drugs that physicians prescribe every day. Football players are often prescribed painkillers to manage the pain caused by spending a lot of time running full speed into 300-pound men. Abuse of and dependence on painkillers can and has skyrocketed in recent years. And according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, pain medication overdoses kill more Americans each year than cocaine and heroin combined. But according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, a fatal marijuana overdose is extremely unlikely. Because it slows hand-eye coordination and reaction time, marijuana is not a performance enhancer, but it is illegal under federal law, even if the 2 states fielding Super Bowl teams this year, Washington and Colorado, are the same 2 states that have legalized recreational use of marijuana. Joining us now from Denver, Colorado is Mason Tvert, who is Communications Director for the Marijuana Policy Project. Nice to have you, Mason.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so how is it that this Super Bowl actually ends up providing an opportunity for you to tackle, pun intended, the issue of marijuana use?
Well, the Super Bowl is one of the biggest events of the entire year, and we thought it was a great opportunity to raise awareness of the NFL's marijuana policy and really about marijuana policy in general, because the NFL's policy that punishes players simply for making the safer choice to use marijuana instead of alcohol is really demonstrative of how a large segment of our society still treats marijuana. And we need to start seeing that change so that it catches up with public attitudes and public policy at that point.
So, yeah, I mean, we were looking at a recent Gallup poll showing that 58% of Americans believe that marijuana should be made legal, with only 39% saying no. That was as of October of 2013. So you do actually have a majority of Americans saying it should be made legal, but it does still feel a little different to say that than to say players ought to be using it. I mean, I get your point about it's safer than alcohol, but I also probably don't think it's a good idea for players to be drinking during the season either.
Well, you know, what it comes down to is this. The NFL allows players to use alcohol, and if it's going to do that, and it's going to even go so far as to promote the use of alcohol, not only among fans, but among players.
Well,
you know,
there is that.
Has a deal with Uber in order to get players rides to and from the bars to keep them out of trouble. Why can't it simply allow players to use marijuana? You know, the NHL, the National Hockey League, they don't have a marijuana policy, and no one really seems to mind. It doesn't seem to affect the game at all. So this is really just a foolish policy that needs to end.
Mason, that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that, but clearly your point that it's not just about the use by players, but the promotion. Obviously, there's a lot of alcohol commercials and sort of promotion that is associated with sports games. Wade, you want to jump in here?
I think the idea of some black men's smoking pot is a problem. Also, you know, just this idea that
70% of the league is African American.
Exactly. But OxyContin is basically a lesser form of heroin. So we're okay with players doing that. But I think that if medical marijuana could be something that players could use, that's a positive thing, you know. And I think that you know, similar to how Magic Johnson, his advocacy around AIDS has helped to kind of shift that. If the NFL got behind like players using marijuana, it could really shift the discourse around, you know, how young people are being stopped and frisked and police for that.
Oh yeah, I mean, to me, it's cruel and unusual that in a sport with so much pain, players, particularly in states where medical marijuana is legal, are being denied that. And about the racialized aspect, you know, there wasn't a marijuana policy in the NBA until the 1999 collective bargaining agreement, precisely because, do you remember '99, all the hysteria around Allen Iverson, and all these new generation of players who aren't clean cut like Jordan, that dovetailed together very smoothly. You know why the NFL doesn't want to have a policy on this? Because they don't want teams that are in states like Colorado and Washington Washington State, using that as a recruiting advantage for free agents.
But not only that, but you got to remember too that the NFL still is a part of sort of the whole overall sports marketing that does at the end of the day have children at the end of that chain. And I think there is a reluctance to promote any behavior because kids do look up to athletes. So I think part of the reticence too around, and it is interesting that there is so much promotion of alcohol because these are sports that are then emulated at the little league level, and kids idolize these players. So there's a fine line where a lot of parents, and it's considered sort of a wholesome sport.
I agree with you.
Stick with me because I think this notion of children at the end of the line, and the issue also Dave brought up about pain, and I want to come back to you, Mason, as soon as we come back, because I do want to ask you about pot and pain because we talked about healthcare early on. So a little more when we come back. We're back and talking about how this Super Bowl is bringing up issues around the legalization of marijuana. And Mason, I want to come to you because I want to show this image. This is the Smart Approaches to Marijuana ad that is placed really large near the Super Bowl stadium that suggests that motivation, perseverance, and determination are aspects of playing the game, but that marijuana provides none of the above. And it says, marijuana kills your drive, don't lose in the game of life. And then a response to it that shows, alcohol saying overdose deaths, violent crime, and serious injury, and then showing cannabis saying none of the above, and saying prohibiting adults from making the safer choice is not a smart approach. And so on the one hand, there's this sort of, comparison between alcohol and marijuana. The other is that the Institute for Cannabis Research, Medical Cannabis Research, suggests that marijuana may be particularly useful as a treatment in pain, which we know that many NFL players experience significantly. So are these the arguments then that your organization and others are making?
Yeah, the NFL has no place policing marijuana use by players. If it's legal under state law, the federal government is willing to recognize state laws that make marijuana legal for medical and adult use. Why can't the NFL? They don't punish players who fail to pay child support or get speeding tickets. There's really just no need for them to be doing this, but they are. And in doing so, they're steering players away from using marijuana and toward using more harmful substance, whether it's alcohol to have fun or painkillers and other harmful narcotics to alleviate their pain.
Yep. So Dave, I want to bring in because he brings up the point about child support. Joy had said that at the end of any narrative are kids. You want to jump in on that?
I did because, so the NFL doesn't want to send a message to kids that marijuana is okay. They're right now sending a message to kids that sexism is okay, that the objectification of women is okay, that over-the-top militarism is a prerequisite to patriotism. That'll be a huge message today when we watch the Super Bowl. And so if the NFL really wants to go down this moral road about the lessons they are teaching children, they coddle players who commit acts of domestic violence and attack players who smoke recreational marijuana, then let's have that discussion. But let's have it honestly about the actual moral lessons that all too often seep out of the game.
Yeah, Wade, you want to jump in on that?
Wow.
Sometimes they just be dropping the mic and you're like, well, I can't even.
I was just like, wow. I totally agree with Dave. I think that there is a larger conversation to be had. And I just think that if a medical doctor is saying that it's safer for players to smoke marijuana than it is to take prescription drugs, then who is the NFL to say otherwise?
Yeah, Roman.
Yeah, I mean, ownership policies are conservative, and for years, marijuana has been put in the category of street drugs. You have steroid tests, and then you have drugs of abuse tests, and marijuana, heroin, cocaine, I mean, it's all put in the same category, unfortunately. And there was an article in the, I think, USA Today that said, players who took all the pain pills and though they developed the pain issues. The guys who smoked or used marijuana didn't have those pain problems, didn't have a pain addictions when football was over. So maybe from a pain standpoint, it does make sense, but it has to be in a liquid form. And we're not at that argument yet because there's still this perception of a guy smoking a blunt, not for pain, just because he wants to smoke it. And you don't want, and I think they don't want to give that perception, but I do agree, you do have to have the conversation.
Although there is that point, Mason, that actually at least some some survey research suggests that a lot of folks are. I mean, there's an unscientific survey suggesting that 48 current and former players, front office executives, head and assistant coaches actually do, in fact, sort of, half of them are making use of it. And so, maybe it's already there, and it's just a question of changing our attitudes towards it. Mason Tvert in Denver, Roman Oben, Dave Zirin, MSNBC host Joy Reid, who can now go home to Denver, and Wade Davis. Thank you all so much.